My name is Lorraine Whitmore. I spent 40 years of my life making sure everyone else was remembered. I scrapbooked the holidays, labeled the photo albums, made birthday cakes shaped like castles and footballs. I was the curator of our family's memories until slowly I started disappearing from them. The Thanksgiving photo was just the latest insult. It wasn't even subtle this time. I stood there watching my daughter-in-law Meredith gather everyone around the fireplace. "Okay, everyone, squeeze in," she chirped. My son Paul was laughing with a glass of bourbon, my youngest Lisa adjusting her baby's bib. Even my grandkids pulled their iPhones to grab their own snapshots. And me, I was clearing plates. "Mom, can you move out of the way of the light?" Meredith called, not even looking up from her phone. It was so casual, so routine, like I was an object in the room, not a person. Not the one who'd cooked half that meal, set that table, folded the napkins into little poinsettias. I stepped aside, not saying a word. Click, click. The flash went off. Laughter. The dog even made it into the picture. But I didn't. Again. It wasn't the first time I was excluded either. But something inside me cracked that evening in a way it hadn't before. Maybe because it was Thanksgiving. Or maybe because I'd been fooling myself that things were getting better. That somehow I was imagining it. That I was just being sensitive. But you can't unsee a photo. And you can't unfeel erasure. As they all admired the picture afterward, zooming in, smiling, uploading it to some group chat I was never invited to, I quietly walked to the guest bathroom, shut the door, and let myself cry. But not the kind of cry where you hope someone knocks. No. The kind where something in you decides, enough. You might actually regret missing out on this dramatic story. So before you sit down and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Because I'm about to show you exactly what happens when a mother decides she's done being invisible. I didn't say anything the next morning. I woke up early, made coffee, and slipped out to the front porch of my little house on Ivy Lane, the one I kept after Robert passed away. The chill in the Charleston air bit through my robe, but it grounded me, reminded me I was still here, even if no one else seemed to see me anymore. I stared at the oak trees across the street, their leaves turning a brittle shade of orange. There was a time when my family filled this porch with laughter and music and the scent of pecan pie. I used to rock my grandbabies to sleep here. Now the silence had weight. I pulled out the old family photo album I had tucked away in the hall closet, the original, thick with glue and faded captions. My fingers ran over the edges of pages I'd crafted like love letters. Paul's 5th birthday, Lisa's high school graduation, our 25th wedding anniversary. In those photos I was there, smiling, present, holding the cake, holding the camera, holding the family. But then came the later pages, loose prints Meredith had sent, or ones I'd printed from their Facebook posts. Christmas, Easter, family vacations, weddings. My face appeared less and less, until eventually it vanished. I thought maybe it was just chance, a bad angle, a missed invitation. But as I flipped through that album now, I realized something chilling. I was systematically removed from the story. My own children were writing me out. That Thanksgiving wasn't an anomaly. It was a pattern. A truth I didn't want to admit. The photos didn't lie. That weekend I went to Lisa's house to return a casserole dish. She greeted me on the porch, her smile tight. "Oh, you didn't have to bring this back so soon," she said, tucking her hair behind her ear. I looked past her. The hallway walls were lined with framed pictures, candid shots of birthday parties, barbecues, beach days. Not a single one included me. Not one. Inside, her husband Greg walked by, talking loudly into a phone. "Yeah, Lisa's mom dropped by. The one who's always hanging around but never really involved." "Yeah, that one. That one." I froze. Lisa didn't correct him. She didn't even flinch. I forced a smile, handed over the dish, and left. I don't even remember if she said goodbye. I sat in my car and gripped the steering wheel like it could stop my hands from trembling. That night, I pulled out my journal, the one I used to write letters to Robert after he died. I wrote, "They don't see me anymore, Robert. I'm in the room, but I'm not in the picture." And maybe I let it happen. Maybe I thought if I loved them quietly, they'd love me loudly. But all I hear now is silence. I closed the journal and stared at the fireplace where our wedding portrait still hung. That woman in the picture, she had a fire in her eyes, and she was about to come back. Because if they could erase me from their photos, then I could erase them from my will. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake replaying years of memories through a new lens. Not nostalgia, but audit. A cold review of every moment I'd made myself smaller, so my children could feel taller. Every time I smiled through being forgotten, every shrug I gave when a seat at the table wasn't set for me, and every photo I took that I never appeared in. The next morning, I didn't go to the grocery store. I didn't sweep the porch. I didn't call to check on Lisa's kids or send Paul his usual Monday morning message. I called my lawyer. His name was Arthur Talbot, a calm, sharp man in his late 50s who used to come into my antique shop to browse rare coins. He'd been handling my estate since Robert passed. We'd last spoken over lunch about a year ago when I asked about setting up an education fund for the grandkids. This time I asked something different. I want to update my will, I said flatly. Arthur was quiet for a second. Of course, Lorraine. You want to schedule a meeting next week? No, I said. Today. He knew from my tone not to ask questions. An hour later, I sat in his office overlooking the Battery, the soft winter sun bleeding through heavy plantation shutters. The office smelled like leather and cherry wood. I've had a change of heart, I said, placing my old will on the table. I want to reconsider the distribution of the estate. Arthur adjusted his glasses. All right. Shall we walk through the assets? I nodded. It was a tidy empire. When Robert passed, we sold off some of his holdings. He was a silent partner in a small medical device company, and I invested carefully. My antique shop. Whitmore Antiques had been a local fixture, but it was the real estate that grew quietly under the radar. Properties in Charleston, Savannah, and a little cabin in Asheville. I never even told the kids about. All in all, just over $5 million in liquid and fixed assets. Arthur looked over the spreadsheet and tapped his pen. Do you want to maintain the previous distribution? No, I said. I looked him straight in the eye. I want them removed. Arthur blinked. Removed. I exhaled. My children no longer see me. They don't treat me like a person, let alone a mother. I've been erased in silence over time. It's not abuse. It's apathy. But it still hurts. I won't let them profit from my absence. He studied me for a moment. You understand the implications? Yes. He gave a single nod. Then tell me what you'd like to do. And so I told him about Harper, my late sister's daughter who visited me every month, helped me fix the backyard gate and asked me about my day without checking her phone. I told him about the historical society I'd always wanted to support, about my high school scholarship fund, about the animal rescue where I adopted Daisy, my golden retriever. Arthur listened, taking notes. Then he said, Do you want them to know now? Or after? I paused. After might be easier, but easy wasn't the point anymore. I'll tell them myself, I said. But not yet. Arthur gave me a long look. Lorraine, this is a powerful choice. It's not revenge, I said softly. It's recognition. He nodded slowly. That's what makes it poetic. We finalized the draft. I signed it with a hand that no longer trembled. As I left his office, I looked out over Charleston Harbor, the wind stirring the palmetto trees below. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not by them, but by myself. I didn't rush the next steps. Some truths deserve to be served at just the right temperature. Cold, precise, and undeniable. So I waited. I smiled at Paul when he dropped off some leftover holiday cookies. I nodded when Lisa texted to ask if I could babysit Noah next Friday. I said yes. Of course I did. I wasn't playing nice. I was observing, collecting, seeing how far they'd let the forgetting go. That weekend, Paul invited me to a family picnic at Hampton Park. You don't have to bring anything, he said cheerfully. Just show up. But when I arrived, the picnic blanket was already full. There were folding chairs for everyone, Meredith's parents, even their yoga friend from down the street. Not for me. Oh, we didn't know you were actually coming, Meredith said with a fake smile. But don't worry, we can scoot. I stood for nearly 20 minutes before someone offered me a seat. Not Paul, not Meredith. It was her yoga friend who barely knew me. I ended up sitting awkwardly near the edge, not part of any conversation. Lisa arrived an hour late, her hands full of Tupperware and toddler gear. "Hey, Mom," she said, brushing past me without a hug. "Can you hold Noah?" I held that baby who I adore, but I noticed what happened next. Everyone gathered for photos again. It was a casual thing, someone pulling out a phone and saying, "Let's get one of all the cousins." Then all the moms. Then the whole group. But not once did someone say, "Let's get one with Grandma." I was there, in person, with hands full of history and love. But again, not in the picture. I watched Meredith post one of those photos on Instagram that evening. The caption said, "Love this crew." Couldn't imagine a better family. I wasn't even tagged. The following morning, I received a group message from Paul, Lisa, and Meredith. They were planning a big family vacation next summer, Cancun. A rental villa, 10 days. Just us and the kids, Paul wrote. "We'll plan a special trip with you later, Mom." That was it. Not an invitation. An exclusion wrapped in the suggestion that I wouldn't even want to go. But they were wrong. I wanted to go, not for the beaches, but because I deserved a seat at the damn table. That night, I pulled out the revised copy of my will and stared at it by the fireplace. I imagined their faces when they'd read it one day. The confusion, the hurt, the questions. But I wasn't trying to punish them. I was trying to teach them what absence really feels like, what it means to be erased. Not from photos, but from legacy. Still a part of me hesitated. The part that remembered Paul's chubby baby cheeks, Lisa's piano recitals, the warm glow of Christmas mornings when they were still little, and I was still the center of their world. But that was then. Now I was just a silhouette they stepped around. And I had a voice again. A legacy that didn't require their permission. I wasn't going to tell them yet, but soon, very soon. Because the next photo they'd see me in would be framed in a lawyer's office. 2 weeks later, Lisa hosted a Sunday brunch for Paul's birthday. She asked me to come early and help set up, which I did. I peeled oranges, folded napkins, even ironed the table runner while she curled her hair upstairs. By the time the guests arrived, everything was perfect. Lisa's kitchen gleamed. The mimosas were flowing. The smell of cinnamon rolls filled the air. I stayed near the kitchen island, my safe corner. Paul walked in tall and confident in that way he'd inherited from Robert. I smiled and reached for a hug, but he was too distracted with his phone and Meredith's chatter about someone's podcast. No one introduced me to the new guests. No one asked how I was doing. I served the quiche. They served each other attention. After brunch, I excused myself to the bathroom, and that's when I overheard it. Lisa and Paul talking in hushed tones on the back porch. "She's always just around," Lisa said. "It's like we have to include her in everything now. It's exhausting." "Well, she doesn't have much else going on," Paul added. "I mean, she's retired widowed. What would she even do if we didn't invite her?" Lisa laughed. "Probably reorganize her spice rack." They both chuckled. It hit me in the chest like a brick. They weren't being cruel. They were being indifferent. Like I was furniture. Background noise. Something they tolerated rather than treasured. I stayed in that bathroom for another 10 minutes pretending to check my phone, pretending I hadn't heard what I heard. But something inside me solidified. This was no longer about just being forgotten. It was about being diminished. And I would not allow that. Not anymore. The next morning I called Arthur. "There's one more thing I want to add," I said. "Of course," he replied. "What's on your mind?" "I want to write them each a letter," I said. "To be included with the reading of the will. Personal. Honest. Clear. I want them to understand why." Arthur paused, then said gently, "Lorraine, do you want to write them with fire or with grace?" I smiled. "Both." That afternoon, I sat down at my old roll-top desk, the one Robert gave me when we opened the shop. I pulled out my fountain pen, took a deep breath, and began writing letters to my children. Not angry letters, not cruel ones, but truthful ones. I told Paul about the time I drove through the night to bring him his forgotten thesis paper in college, and how I would have done it again in a heartbeat. I reminded Lisa how I sold my pearl earrings to pay for her first apartment's deposit. I told Meredith how I watched her kids every Friday for 2 years without ever asking for thanks. And then I told them how slowly and silently they'd taught me that my presence had become a burden. an afterthought. I ended each letter the same way. This is not punishment. This is clarity. I was written out of the family photo long before I picked up the pen to revise my will. I signed each one with love, because that's what made the truth undeniable. It came from a place of love that had been stretched too thin for too long. It was March when the call came from Paul. "Mom," he began casually, "we're updating our family gallery wall. You know, the one in the hallway by the stairs, and we're getting some new canvas prints made. Just wanted to check if you had that one photo of Dad holding Noah during his first Christmas." I paused. "That's a nice photo," I said. "Yeah, we just want a full generational look. You know, like lineage." Lineage. The word rang in my ears. Not once had they asked for a photo of me. Not once had I been included in those generational ideas unless I was the one framing them, hanging them, or quietly stepping out of the frame to make space for everyone else. "I'll check," I told Paul. But I didn't send the photo. Instead, I walked into my study, opened the top drawer of my desk, and looked at the updated will again. The letters were sealed, each envelope thick with the weight of memory and truth. It wasn't about money. It was about memory. Because when people erase you from photographs, it's not just about paper. It's about presence, about how you are remembered. Or if you are remembered at all. That week, I had Arthur schedule an appointment for the letters to be delivered not upon my passing, but sooner. It was time. On a breezy Thursday morning, an unmarked envelope arrived at Paul's house. Another at Lisa's. A third at Meredith's. Handwritten. No explanation. Just their names. That afternoon I waited. The phone was silent for hours. Then, "Bizizeti," my phone lit up. "Paul," I answered. "Mom, what is this?" His voice wasn't angry. It was confused. Shaken. "It's the truth," I said softly. There was silence. Then, "I didn't know. We didn't realize you felt this way." "I know you didn't," I replied. "That's why I wrote it down." He didn't yell. He didn't apologize. He just breathed. A shallow, unsure breath. Lisa called next. Her voice was brittle. "You changed your will." "I did." Her tone flared. "You're cutting us out. After everything we've done for you." I didn't raise my voice. "Lisa, what have you done with me lately?" She froze. "I've been your emergency contact. Your babysitter. Your extra set of hands. But never again your mother in your eyes. Not in the photos. Not at the table. Not when it counts." She hung up. I exhaled deeply. It hurt. Of course it did. But it was clean. No more wondering. No more waiting. Just space. And the first edge of peace. A few days passed with radio silence. Then on Sunday evening, a knock echoed through my quiet house. I opened the door to find Meredith standing there alone, holding one of the letters I'd written. Her makeup was smudged mascara, tracing faint shadows beneath her eyes. For once, she looked like someone who wasn't sure she belonged anywhere. I didn't know you remembered that first Thanksgiving," she said quietly. "The one where I was asked to take the photo," I replied. "And then, not in a single one." She nodded slowly. Meredith stepped inside. She didn't speak for a minute, just stood in my hallway staring at the walls. Ironically, they were filled with photos, decades of family memories arranged with care. But none of them were recent. Because no one had sent me any. "I think I misunderstood your presence," she admitted. I tilted my head. "Misunderstood it how?" "I saw you as stable, always there. The one holding the family together in the background. So I forgot to look directly at you." She sank into the armchair by the window, her voice fragile. "It's not fair, I know. I thought by not bothering you with the spotlight I was being kind. Like I was letting you rest. Rest isn't invisibility, Meredith." "I know," she whispered. There was a pause, then a flicker of something hope. "Are you really removing everyone from your will?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the shelf and pulled out an old scrapbook. The cover was soft from years of hands, the edges curled. I handed it to her. She opened it to a random page. Paul's 8th birthday. Me laughing as I held the cake. My apron covered in flour. The way Paul looked at me like I was the sun. "You were never invisible," Meredith said. I smiled, but it was a sad one. But now I'm not. Because I chose not to be. I didn't offer her tea. I didn't try to soften the moment. She stayed for another few minutes, flipping through the scrapbook in silence. Then she stood, thanked me, and left. She didn't ask if she was back in the will. That wasn't the point anymore, because by now it wasn't about what they'd get from me. It was about whether they'd see me. And that shift, it had already begun. After Meredith's visit, the atmosphere within the family began to shift almost imperceptibly at first. Lisa texted me a photo of her daughter painting Easter eggs. "Thought you'd like this?" she wrote. No apology, just a single image. But to me, it was a thread, thin, fragile, yet deliberate. 2 days later, Paul called. His tone was different this time, not performative, not brisk, almost thoughtful. "We're planning a barbecue next weekend," he said. "I know you probably have plans, but if you're free, we'd like to have you." I didn't say yes, not immediately. "Who's coming?" I asked. "Just family," he replied. Everyone. Everyone. That word used to sting. Now it challenged them more than it challenged me. "I'll think about it," I said. And I meant it. That weekend I did go. I arrived a little late on purpose, curious whether I would be noticed or missed. The backyard was lively, full of chatter and kids chasing bubbles. The scent of grilled corn and spice hung in the air. When I stepped into view, Paul's eyes widened. Lisa's voice trailed off mid-sentence. Meredith stood still, holding a plate of ribs. But this time, the silence wasn't avoidance. It was recognition. "Mom," Paul exclaimed, walking toward me, arms wide. I let him hug me. Lisa approached next. "We saved you a seat." She pointed to the long picnic table, and bless her, it was not at the end. It was right in the middle, between Meredith and Paul. With a proper place setting and a glass of iced tea, I sat. The conversation resumed, this time including me. I was asked about my garden, about an old recipe, even about a book I'd mentioned years ago. For a few hours I felt seen, but I also knew it wasn't a victory. It was just a beginning, because love that needs a legal document to remember you, that love is conditional, and I wasn't living for conditions anymore. After dessert, Lisa pulled out her phone. "Let's take a picture." Everyone gathered by the rose trellis. I stood waiting to be asked. Paul reached for my hand. "Come on, Mom. You're in this one." Front and center. It was reflex to smile. And yet, as the flash went off, something inside me remained still. Not angry, not triumphant, just calm. Because I knew a photo wouldn't undo years of fading. But for the first time in a long while, they were trying to refocus. And I was letting them adjust the lens. The Monday after the barbecue, I sat on my sun porch with a cup of chamomile tea and reread the letters I had written to my children. They were still sealed, still stacked neatly in a drawer. I'd had copies made, of course, the originals had already been sent. But something compelled me to revisit my own words, as if to remind myself why I'd written them in the first place. Each sentence was a mirror, each paragraph a wound sutured by ink. I wasn't regretting the decision. No, there was a strange peace in finally claiming the narrative of my own life. For decades I had mothered, I had supported, I had stepped out of frame so others could shine. And now, I had stepped back into the frame. The thing is, no one teaches you how to age with dignity in a family that's grown too busy to remember your birthday without a Facebook reminder. Or how to stay whole when the people you raised begin carving you out like an outdated chapter. That's what the will had become. Not revenge, but revision. Arthur called that afternoon. "Lorraine," he said, "I just received a message from Lisa's husband. He's requesting a meeting." "Oh," I responded, cautious. "About the will?" "Yes. He says the family would like to understand what they can do to rectify the misunderstanding." His words. I chuckled softly. "It's not a misunderstanding. It's a pattern." Arthur was quiet for a beat. "Would you like me to respond on your behalf?" "No," I said. "I'll handle this one." That Friday, I invited all 3 of my children to my home. No holiday, no birthday, no occasion. Just me. They arrived hesitantly, Paul with his hands in his pockets, Lisa holding a gift basket, Meredith looking uncertain. I led them to the living room, where the old family albums were already laid out on the coffee table, the same ones I had pored over during many quiet nights. "Do you remember this?" I asked, pointing to a photo of the three of them at the beach, Robert and I in the background. I took this shot, Lisa said. You were behind the camera like always. Exactly, I replied. Like always. They looked at one another. Mom, Meredith started. No, I said gently. Don't apologize. Just sit. Look at these. Really look. See how I was there every moment and somehow still faded from the memory. I saw it hit them. Not all at once, but like a slow tide. Then Paul asked, Can we make a new album? One where you're in every photo. I nodded, but I said, It's not just about pictures. Lisa whispered, It's about how we make you feel. Yes, I didn't need tears. I needed truth, and they were finally offering it. After that conversation in my living room, something subtle shifted, not just in how my children behaved, but in how I existed around them. Lisa began calling every Tuesday morning sometimes, just to tell me about a new recipe she was trying. Sometimes to ask if I needed help with errands. Meredith started sending me small handwritten notes tucked into mail. Memories from childhood, thoughts from therapy, even apologies. She couldn't quite say aloud. Paul, perhaps the most guarded of the three, surprised me the most. One Saturday, he showed up with a stack of framed photos. New ones, he said, smiling as he began placing them on my shelves. There was me holding baby Noah at the hospital, me helping Meredith into her wedding dress, me and Robert at our 40th anniversary mid-laugh. I hadn't seen these before. You kept them? I asked. Paul nodded. I didn't know where to put them. Until now. I wanted to cry, but not from sadness. From recognition. That weekend, Paul invited me to speak at Noah's school event. They're doing a family legacy project, he explained. Noah wants to talk about you. Me. Not Robert. Not Paul. Me. So I went. And there I stood in the school auditorium next to my grandson as he read aloud. My grandma Lorraine helped raise 3 kids on her own after my grandpa passed away. She worked as a nurse, and even now she grows her own herbs and bakes better cookies than anyone in town. The room erupted in applause, but I was frozen. Not by fear, by disbelief that I was finally being spoken of in the present tense, as if I mattered now, not just in memory or mythology. Later that evening back home, I sat by the fireplace with my journal. I thought about rewriting my will again, not to punish or reward, but to reflect reality. They were changing, maybe not fast, maybe not fully, but intentionally. Still, I didn't rush, because forgiveness isn't instant, it's a series of moments that must earn their way into your bones. And I wanted to see if they'd stay, not just when I had something to give, but when I had nothing left to prove. A week later, I got an invitation in the mail. It was from Lisa. Embossed in soft gold were the words, Family portrait session Saturday at 10 a.m. Dress nice. You're the centerpiece. No RSVP, no instructions. Just that bold declaration at the bottom. You're the centerpiece. The phrase echoed in my chest like a song long forgotten. Saturday morning came and I stood in front of my closet longer than usual. My hands brushed over dresses I hadn't worn in years. Each fabric a memory. Church services, anniversaries, quiet dinners with Robert. I finally chose a deep navy wrap dress with a silver pin I'd saved from my nursing days. As I looked in the mirror, I noticed something odd. I looked radiant. Not because of makeup or lighting, but because for the first time in years I was stepping into a space where I wasn't the afterthought. When I arrived at the photo studio, Lisa met me at the door. You're early, she grinned. I didn't want to miss it, I said quietly. Inside the room was warm, the walls lined with soft backdrops and stands of natural lighting. Meredith was fussing over her twins' hair and Paul was adjusting his tie in the corner. Then I saw it. A spot marked on the floor dead center with a chair waiting. It wasn't subtle. Mom, sit here, Meredith gestured. You start the arrangement. I sat heart pounding, not from fear, but from feeling the weight of what it meant. This wasn't a performance. It was reparation. The photographer, a gentle young woman with large eyes, asked, Ready? I nodded. Click, click. Then something happened. One by one, each of my children approached me and whispered something before the next photo. Lisa leaned in. I'm sorry we erased you. Click. Paul stepped forward. You were always the backbone. We just didn't see it. Click. Meredith came last. Her voice cracked. You were never a burden. You were a blessing. We were the burden. Click. By the time the flash ended, I was trembling not from cold, but from release. All those years of silencing my pain, of folding myself into the background so they could take the spotlight, they were finally unfolding me again. The photographer offered to print one photo on canvas. Lisa asked which one I wanted. I chose the candid where I was laughing with Meredith's twin girls on my lap, Paul to my right, Lisa brushing a hair off my shoulder. It wasn't posed, but it was true. As we left the studio, Lisa grabbed my hand. Mom, we know we don't deserve forgiveness yet, but we want to keep earning it. You don't need to earn it, I said, but you do need to honor it. The difference they understood, and that made all the difference. Later that night, I sat by my window and looked up at the moon. For the first time in years, I didn't feel lonely watching it. I felt witnessed. Because being seen is more than being looked at. It's being remembered in the moments no one else thinks to document. The canvas photo arrived 2 days later, wrapped in layers of brown paper and twine. There was no card, no note, just the image itself, vibrant and alive. I hung it in the foyer where every visitor could see. It was more than decoration. It was declaration. That evening, I received a group text, something we rarely used before. Lisa had sent a message. Hey family, Thanksgiving's at our place this year. No RSVP needed. Just bring yourself. And yes, everyone is included. Love you. Everyone. The word still made me pause. It used to be a reminder of exclusion. Now it felt like an invitation to rewrite the script. I replied with a simple, I'll bring my sweet potato casserole. And the old photo albums? No one questioned it. No one pushed back. At Thanksgiving, Lisa had set the table for 12. There was a place card with my name at the head of the table, the same seat Robert used to take. I sat down not out of nostalgia, but because they wanted me there. During dinner, Paul raised his glass and tapped it lightly with a fork. I want to say something. The room quieted. I think we all know this year has changed. Or maybe we've changed. And that change started because Mom spoke the truth. My hands trembled around my fork. Meredith added, the truth hurt. But it also healed. Lisa smiled across the table. And we're better for it. No one made a toast. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. After dinner, while the kids were playing in the den, I walked into the kitchen to help clean. Lisa followed me in. Mom, we've been talking. We want to update our family trust. Oh. I raised an eyebrow. Yes, and we want to make sure your name stays at the top, not just on paper, in how we live, how we raise our kids. I didn't respond right away, because something bigger than words was blooming inside me, a sensation of being rooted in their future, not just their past. Later that week, Arthur called again. I've reviewed your will revisions, he said. Would you like me to make it official? I paused. No, I said slowly. Let's hold off. Let's give it some time. You're sure? Yes, because this time I want them to earn it. Not with fear, but with love. Arthur chuckled, spoken like someone who finally holds the pen. He was right. For the first time in decades, I wasn't just part of their story. I was the author of mine. A few weeks before Christmas, I found myself standing in front of a boutique, looking through the frosted glass at a red wool coat. It reminded me of the one Robert had given me on our 25th anniversary. That one had long gone threadbare, tucked away in the attic with so many other remnants of my old life. But this coat was bold, deep crimson with a high collar and sleek buttons. It wasn't something you wore to disappear. It was something you wore to be seen. I walked in and tried it on. The salesgirl beamed. It's like it was made for you. It's time, I said softly. Time to stop apologizing for taking up space, for being loud in color, for wearing my story like a badge instead of a burden. That Christmas, Lisa hosted again. The house was strung with warm white lights, cinnamon in the air, carols playing softly. But this time, something was palpably different. As I stepped through the door in my new red coat, Meredith gasped. Mom, you look amazing. Paul whistled. Well, now I know where Lisa gets her fashion sense. I laughed, a real belly laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from myself in years. Dinner was abundant. Candles flickered. Wine flowed. And when it came time for photos, no one had to be told. They pulled me into the center of each shot without hesitation. "Don't you dare crop me out," I joked, pointing at Lisa's phone. "Never again," she said, clutching my hand. After dessert, Paul gathered the kids to open presents. Each of them had something for me: scarves, teas, hand-painted cards. But it was Meredith who gave me something unexpected. A framed letter. Inside was a printout of the group chat we'd had after the family photo shoot. The same one where each sibling had confessed what they never said aloud. "We wanted you to know," she whispered, "that we meant it." My eyes stung with tears, but I blinked them back. "Then prove it," I said, not just once, but always. She nodded. That night, I sat in the guest bedroom Lisa had insisted I stay over and journaled until my hand cramped. Not about revenge, not about hurt, but about return. A return to self, to dignity, to the table. They didn't hand it back to me. I took it. And now they were learning how to share it. I slept that night like a woman who had weathered the storm and found not rescue but reunion. And sometimes that's the greater miracle. The new year came gently with a soft snowfall blanketing the streets and quiet jazz humming from the radio. I was sitting in the sunroom, tea in hand, when the doorbell rang. Lisa stood there, cheeks pink from the cold, holding a thick manila folder. "I didn't call ahead," she said almost shyly, "but I wanted to show you something." We sat together at the kitchen table, the late afternoon light streaking across the wooden surface as she opened the folder. Inside was a collection of documents, copies of the family trust, a notarized letter, and a new clause. "We updated it," she said, voice steady. "Not just the inheritance. We included a clause that requires every generation to create a legacy file: stories, photos, audio clips of our elders. You start it. You're the first entry." I stared at the document, stunned. "You're memorializing me." "No," she said. "We're centering you." For a woman who'd been cropped out of pictures forgotten at parties and seated near the exits, it was a declaration that landed like grace. I flipped through the packet. In the front was a letter. It was signed by all 3 children. "To our mother, we were wrong. You were never just a background character. You were the author, the director, the reason we existed as a family. We honor you now in full, and we promise never again will we frame our lives without you in it." I didn't cry. I wept. Lisa sat silently, her hand resting on mine, as I folded over with decades of grief giving way to something warmer. Eventually, I stood up and walked to the hallway where the coat closet stood. I pulled down a dusty photo album, one from the early years when Robert was still alive, and the kids were small, before resentment, before distance, before silence. "I think it's time we start scanning these," I said. Lisa smiled through tears. "Let's start tonight." And so we did. We spent hours curled on the floor digitizing memories, laughing at haircuts, remembering birthdays, reconnecting with the people we used to be. At midnight, Paul joined via video call, holding a mug of cocoa, Meredith texting in from her room with a selfie of her and her daughters reading bedtime stories I used to tell them. We were rebuilding not a house or a legacy, but something quieter and harder: respect. The kind that doesn't come from money or law, but from finally seeing someone not just as mom or grandma, but as a woman. A whole woman, with a voice, with history, with worth. Spring arrived like a quiet promise. Warm winds whispering through the curtains, robins nesting on the windowsill, and hyacinths blooming in the front yard, just as Robert used to plant them. I stood on the porch one morning watering the potted herbs when Paul pulled up in his car. He waved and called out, "Mind some company." "Only if you bring coffee," I joked. He grinned and held up 2 cups from my favorite cafe. "I've learned a thing or two." We sat under the awning in silence for a few minutes, just listening to the world breathe. Then he cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began, "about the will, about what it means to leave something behind." I sipped my coffee. "It's more than money." "Exactly," he said. "It's memory, identity. And for a long time, I think we thought we could just inherit the best parts and forget the hard ones." I looked at him. "But it's the hard parts that shape us." He nodded. "I'm ready to be shaped by it." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a leather-bound book. "It's for you." The first printed copy of our family legacy archive. You're the opening chapter. The title on the cover read, "In Her Image, the Woman Who Raised Us." I traced the letters with my fingertips. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just read it when you're ready. We'll add to it as we go. Every year, every child, every lesson. I clutched the book to my chest, suddenly aware of just how far we had come. From invisible to indelible. That night, as I sat beside my fireplace reading the words my children had written about me, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt witnessed. For every Christmas dinner I was left out of. For every photo I wasn't in. For every moment I was told I was too much or too old or just a burden. There was now a truth too big to ignore. I mattered, and not because of what I gave, but because of who I was. They finally saw the full frame. No more cropping. No more fading out. The next day I called Arthur. "Let's talk about the will," I said. "Yes," he answered cautiously. "I've made my decision." I instructed him to revise it not out of spite, but with clarity. My estate would still go to my children, but now it would be tied to a foundation in my name. A legacy scholarship for women over 60 returning to school or starting businesses later in life. A chance for others like me to write their own next chapter. My kids would be co-stewards. They wouldn't just inherit wealth. They would build legacy. That afternoon, I walked into my living room where the canvas photo still hung. I stood in front of it for a long moment, hand over my heart. This was my family. Flawed, fumbling, but finding their way, and I had led them there not with vengeance, but with vision. In the quiet that followed, I often sat by the window watching the light shift across the living room floor, tracing the silhouettes of the life I had lived. I used to wonder what justice looked like for women like me, those pushed to the edges, treated as background noise in the very stories we helped build. I thought it might look like revenge, silence, estrangement. But what I learned was far more powerful. Justice can look like recognition. It's your children realizing you're not an accessory in their lives, but the foundation of it. It's reclaiming your voice, your space in the frame, your name on the stories they tell. They used to crop me out of pictures. Now they quote me in speeches. They used to roll their eyes at my advice. Now they teach it to their children. And while they still have flaws and moments of forgetting, I no longer shrink or apologize. I remind them, not with anger, but with presence. I became the matriarch I always was. Not because they gave me the title, but because I took back the truth. And if you're listening to this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been pushed out of the frame or spoken over at your own dinner table, let this be your reminder. You are the story. You are the legacy. You are the woman they'll one day quote. If not in this chapter, then in the one you teach them to write. So before you go, I'll ask what I asked them. Don't leave anyone out of the picture, especially not yourself.